welcome to the next edition of One to One in 20 with Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce. My name is Paul Britton, I'm Chief Executive for the Chamber, and in this session I'm interviewing Richard Baker, Managing Partner for Ernst & Young. We're talking leadership, we're talking strategy, and looking at how we can set out the framework for growth of the Thames Valley and recovery from COVID-19. So hello Richard, welcome.
Hi, Paul. Thank
so
you.
This is our part of a number of conversations that we regularly have, but this one is recorded. This is our 1 to 1 in 20 interview sessions with business leaders across the region. I'm delighted to catch you today. We're going to spend our time together talking about EY's view on and your view on the impact of COVID-19. But I think one of the things that members will be most interested in hearing about is also about perhaps the longer term projections around the region. And EY has been involved in a good amount of work around doing that over the years, so it'd be very interesting to hear that. But I thought our first reflection could be a more personal one, just in terms of how you feel. What's most important in your leadership role at the moment that you're feeling? Because I certainly feel my leadership role has changed in shape over the last few weeks.
Yeah, and I think without doubt, this is one of the most sort of stretching, demanding periods in my career to date. And that's even with the context for EY, that we're in a really fortunate position of having a highly mobile, highly flexible workforce anyway, with the vast majority of people experienced and equipped, at least from a technology perspective, to work from home. So we've moved relatively seamlessly to working at home. The other piece I would say we're in a very fortunate position on is just the nature of our business is that demand has generally held up for us. Clients still need serving, ongoing services that we deliver to clients like audit and tax. So fortunate in those two ways. And indeed, I've been really proud and pleased with how our people have responded to the challenge of continuing to serve and support clients, but also supporting their teams and supporting each other through this really, really trying time. As I said, it's been really stretching for me, leadership-wise, leading sort of 600 people in the Reading office, 1,000 people in the broader South East region. And we're doing that. We're doing things that we've never done before, breaking new ground at every stage, and doing these new things in such an uncertain environment. We don't know what's going to happen next. No one's written the manual that you can just take off the shelf to say, here's what you do in pandemic crisis response time. But by far and away, the most important part of my role has been the well-being of our people, their safety and physical health, but also mental health as well. This has been a really stretching time for all of us as individuals. So it's definitely been my number one priority, working with my partners and my leadership team, spending a lot of time listening to our people, how they're actually feeling, what they're going through, working out how we respond to mitigate the downsides, and really just making sure we establish a broad set of mechanisms to more effectively support them. As I said, very fortunate in some ways as a business that demand has held up and we're able to keep on serving our clients. Number one priority, keeping our people in a good state of health, physical and mental health. And then of course we've got to have an eye to the future of both recovery, return to the workplace, and I say return to the workplace rather than return to work, because many people are working, just not in their normal workplace. And also trying to rethink the future. How do we take the good things from this experience and also the good things from pre-COVID-19? How do we drop some of the suboptimal things, less productive things that we used to do and we're finding we have to do now? What is that reimagining of the future workplace for EY? And then very quickly, well, not very quickly, financial health of EY is really, really important. It's no good looking after the people if we don't keep the business sound and robust, as well as serving clients. If we don't continue to serve our clients who still need us more than ever in this environment, they need us in different ways from what we anticipating they needed us, but whether it be, applying for business interruption loans, working out how to use the furlough system, how to bring back their people to the workplace safely and productively. All of these things just lend themselves to getting closer to our clients and continuing to support them.
I agree with all that. I'm sure many members would do as well. One of the things that struck me is the amount of conversations you're having, which aren't necessarily something you might have viewed as your core business 6 months ago. You're having conversations with clients where you are giving advice on the basis of general business continuity, or as we're doing now, just sharing best practice around what as senior executives you're finding helps you right now in the current circumstances. In terms of the work that EY has been doing around sector profiling and best practice and those organisations that have been perhaps more resilient than others, has there been anything from that work or your own experiences that's really stood out for you or perhaps surprised you, Richard?
I don't think there's a surprise at one level with how the different sectors have been performing, whether it be, those that are very consumer focused and clearly impacted really seriously, if not existentially, on the consumer services they provide. And if you're in civil aviation, demand has just dropped off a cliff wherever you are in the value chain for civil aviation. Hospitality and leisure, and we've also got to recognise, I guess I've always known this, but it actually, really understanding the impact of things like the breadth and depth of the supply chain that supports Heathrow, for example, that really comes actually quite deep into our Thames Valley region, obviously through to the east of Berkshire and Slough and the like, but further afield as well. So that's been, really quite a surprise to see how that impact has had a knock-on effect on lots of things. And in some ways, what's not surprising, particularly for our region, is the strength of technology, telecoms, life sciences and health, and advanced engineering in general. These are the things you and I have always known are the heartbeat of the economy in the region, and what makes the region such a great economy. For most of those sectors, demand has held up really, really well, and actually increased in many instances. I've got some of my clients who are absolutely, firing on all cylinders because they're able to do what they're doing in a lockdown mode, more demand they can cope with. The supply chain is holding up as well, although, I guess our region isn't quite as dependent on physical supply chains as other regions of the country. So we're quite a knowledge economy, and we can keep that knowledge-based supply chains going in lockdown mode. So in some ways, not surprised with which sectors have been really seriously impacted. The depth of and the granularity as you get further into the supply chain to understand the impacts is quite an eye-opener for me. And then the strength for those high value sectors that are just going, continuing to go really well. So, really interesting from a sector mix, and I'm very pleased to see that the things, we've always felt were strong about our regional economy are playing through as strong in a crisis time. And I think that bodes very well for the longer term future of the regional economy.
I knew that optimism would shine through when you contributed to our winter debates in the past. That's been the approach from you and from your colleagues as well. And we used to, and we will continue to debate around, what the region's position is going to be. And by the region, I mean, the wider Thames Valley. And you're talking there about some of the sectors that are sustainable and performing well. Do you think that we're going to see an acceleration of a lot of the trends that we talked about in previous Windsor debate sessions around AI and digitalization? I've heard this quite a bit in conversations with other members, but really good to get your take on that.
Yeah, I think there's so much of our region's economy is I like to capture it is that it's a key contributor and enabler of the fourth industrial revolution. So in effect, how are jobs and businesses changing, and indeed products and services in the much more technology supported, enabled way. And it does feel to me like one of the positives, and I know there's a lot of downsides, but one of the positives coming out of COVID-19 is that many businesses are really looking at how do they do things differently. Whereas we've always been a bit frustrated with the rate of technology adoption in many of our businesses, particularly in the SME space. The need to now really look at adopting technology, and for some of our businesses in the region and indeed the country, they can now start thinking about change that would have previously taken maybe 4, 5, 6 years to achieve in terms of changing their operating model, changing their way of doing things, really upping their productivity. They can look at accelerating that change for 4 or 5 years down to 6, 12, 18, 24 months instead, because there is the burning platform to do it. And many people, of course, are realizing, who weren't as flexible a workforce as they were before, but are now feeling much more flexible because of the experience of working from home. But I don't think it's just that collaboration and communications technology change. It's also really thinking about manual parts of the business model, that the technology is there today that can help things be automated and get our people working on higher value add activities rather than the transactional repeatable activities. So I am an optimist, but I think there's a huge opportunity that we will see accelerated change, which is got to be good.
No, with change, and we started with the impact and the important part of leadership locally, but also within each and every business. But you and I have spoken before about what that leadership structure could and should look like within not just a business community, perhaps, but within local government or regional government. And we've always professed that we perhaps have an imperfect model across the Thames Valley region because of its diversity and its public sector structure, if you like. But what, in your view, again, around post-COVID, do you see they're likely to be a change in terms of what that structure looks like? Are we? I've heard comments around whether we're going to see devolution, and we're going to see a Thames Valley mayor. Is this the future for the Thames Valley?
Well, Paul, I've always been a big fan of having more collaboration going on in the region that creates a bit of a vision of the future, something to aim for, that actually the various organizations, business, public sector, third sector, whatever, can align behind, collaborate and aim towards getting there. And I think that's needed more than ever. I was just reflecting on my last 4 or 5 years in role in the Thames Valley, and it started off, we were starting to feel a little bit upbeat post-financial crisis that the economy was picking up, and then Brexit came along, right? And just at the beginning of this calendar year, we were feeling like, we got a bit of clarity on Brexit. We can start thinking about pushing forward with the economy again, and then COVID-19 hit us. And And those three things, right, they've all really hit us hard, but that's in the midst of, I spoke about the fourth industrial revolution earlier, but also the geopolitical landscape is not getting any more certain. Its volatility and uncertainty is just going to stay with us. And therefore, I just think it's incumbent on us as a country, but also in our regions within the country, to reflect on all of these things that are driving massive opportunity, but also massive threat to our livelihoods, both from a business and a workforce perspective. And I'm rambling a bit here, Paul, but we've got some great strengths in our region. The sector mix, the range of businesses, large and small, the universities and educators, the highly skilled workforce, which is second to none in this country, and a really convenient location, right, with a high quality of living. You take those pluses and think, it's really important that we as a region play our part in being as good as we possibly can be as a region, right, for the good of the region, but also the good of the UK. And I just feel like the need is so great for us to have much more alignment to a common vision and a common way of getting there. I actually think that some of the things we used to reflect on as being a disadvantage for the region might turn out to be more of a positive going forward. So the fact that we've got a very distributed economy, we don't have a big concentration on one capital city in the middle, and nearly every other region of the UK has a big capital city, which is the hub of everything. We may find that the distributed economy we have, spread over many different towns, cities and local regions, actually makes us stronger and more resilient going forward, compared to everything happening in one centre. The other factor that we often talk about is the fact that public transport is great in the region if you want to go directly towards London or directly away from London, but in order to cross the region, it's pretty poor, and we all generally jump in cars. That again may be a plus, not environmentally, but a plus in these post-COVID times.
You shared with me before, Richard, around this this notion that post-COVID we might see some significant changes in terms of business and human behaviour, commuter behaviour, choice of lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I have to, I agree with you. And this is a kind of, it's building on perhaps some of the messages that we've given in the past around foreign direct investment. You can go into London and you can see, that London is a magnet for investment and for, all the sites and the key wonderful things that make that a global city. But perhaps this is a time for reflection for businesses and for the wider community as well around what role London plays. And we know as a business community that London is a key driver for our own local economy. And perhaps we'll start to see a change in behaviour which may well appeal to businesses and to folks spending more time, more money and more leisure time in the leafy suburbs, as we call it.
I do think that will be a move. The commuters that are part of our population in the region will almost certainly be travelling to London less. That means they're spending more time and money in the region. I think we may also find that a lot of individuals who are really missing the fact of having more space, gardens, places to go, and we could see the ability to attract more talent into the region as well. Appreciate we've got housing challenges ourselves in this region, but I think the region will become more attractive potentially, not just to talent, but also to employers. We've seen a slight shift, a slight trend over the last, let's say decade compared to the last 30, 40 years of overseas companies, turning up at Heathrow and turning right rather than left, Paul, which is, I know that's a phrase you've used for many years. Will we see a change and a desire still to be close to London and close to Heathrow, but actually not paying for large, expensive office blocks in the centre of London. And I think we will see a change in the strategies of corporate occupiers in general, away from big offices in the middle of London and indeed other big cities. So I think these are things that we can take advantage of. But back to the original point about having more alignment, I do feel like the Thames Valley needs to have a bit of a plan if it's going to capitalise on these opportunities. And if we don't have a plan, and because we're very fragmented, it means everyone's kind of pulling in slightly different directions, and generally, quite understandably thinking about their own small region or their own geography first, and the region second. If we could move that to a much more balanced piece of thinking, where the people that think about specific geographies are thinking equally about the region, then that gives us a much better chance of alignment. I am sure that the government itself will be, it is definitely considering what should be the devolution agenda for different parts of the country. And I think the South East and the Thames Valley is quite a tricky conundrum there. But it does feel to me like there's more chance of some discussions happening. What form of devolution happens, I think is up in the air, but just, I think it would be a good thing to have some devolution. But in my view, let's take the opportunity, if there's some devolution, to be thoughtful about the Thames Valley as an economic region, not just arbitrary county or local authority boundaries, which would, the regional economy ignores geographical boundaries, right? And it works on how an economy works. And so, I'm a big fan of us thinking about the regional economy in its broadest sense, not just.
And you challenged Alec Sharma on that, the political working lunch. You actually said to Alec, what does that rebalancing of the economy look like, and what role do you want the Thames Valley to play in that? And the message that came back was a lot of members thought was perhaps a little too simplistic, which was, well, if you're thinking of making an investment in the South East, then perhaps you could look elsewhere in the UK. And perhaps there is more that we need to do collectively as a business community, just to explain that supply chain complexity that you talked about earlier, so that when it comes to local industrial strategies or future plans, as you put it, that the Thames Valley can play its proactive part and contribute. And we're still seeing this levelling up agenda push through in terms of both central government and local government. And I'm with you, Richard. I think that as a business community, there's a real role to play in just articulating best as we can what role we can play in that, because perhaps politically it is a risk for the Thames Valley region. If all eyes are upon the city regions and not necessarily upon Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, and down to Swindon, then we might find ourselves losing out.
Yeah, but to that end, I think the levelling up agenda has clearly taken a big knock, as it were, from COVID-19 in terms of where we're seeing the economic disruption to the country. I still think levelling up is a really important driver that we as a country must deal with. But given the the critical mass and centre of excellence we are in the areas that we need to help the other regions, I think there's a very clear role for us to play that should be, just as much something we can take advantage of as well as contribute to. So, that's, but not easy. All of this is quite complex, but let's, as you've heard me say before, let's stand up and be counted and share our views, and then we're more likely to achieve something that we all think is good rather than not.
Well, I'm gonna. This is a a risky way to end our interview because I'm going to challenge your optimism around this. I've just been speaking with colleagues across the British Chambers of Commerce networks. That's 53 across the UK, and perhaps there is a sense that we are, as a wider business community, still in the eye of the storm in respect to the impact of COVID-19, and that the next few months could be particularly challenging, and this is where we need to play our part to make sure that government's intervening in the right way. How do you feel? What are you seeing from your clients at the moment about their sentiment about what the next few months look like?
You know, I don't think I'd be trying to position anything more optimistic than you've just explained from a Chamber's perspective, Paul. I think we're into some real serious challenges in the short term, and maybe I move from optimism to I am hopeful that the economy is reasonably resilient and robust. And I think the government is clearly trying to get the economy going as quickly and as safely as possible. It's going to be interesting to see whether we can keep this economy opening at the rate that we currently are, whilst avoiding a second spike, which would set us all back again. So, I think it's a fine balance the government's having to manage between getting the economy open and doing it safely. So,
yeah.
But I do think there's still a lot of challenges to come for businesses and the economy and our people.
Well, speaking on behalf of the members and the Chamber, the role that you're playing, EY's playing in helping to provide that kind of strategic framework to that recovery, because that's where we are now. We seem to be stepping out of crisis mode and looking at, as you described earlier, what that future of the region and the UK looks like. I know that's invaluable for us as a Chamber as well, because we do lean upon those that advice. And then, of course, we won't go into it now, but perhaps another time. We've got the B word on the horizon about preparing business for Brexit as well. So I think businesses and business leaders across the region are going to need to be mindful of their own resilience as well, and their own well-being. As I say to my team, this is not a sprint. We have got to pace ourselves around the energy that we're applying this, because there is a risk of burnout, I think, for all of us. So the encouragement I'm giving is that look after yourself. And I think if we can apply that with some structure and good leadership, then like you, I am optimistic that as a region we'll pull through, and we'll pull through strongly.
Good.
Richard, thank you very much for your time again. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Best of luck with the weeks ahead, and thanks again. Cheers.
Okay.
Richard.
Thank you, Paul. Cheers.